Have you ever observed how those who wound us deepest remain in our thoughts the longest? How failed connections continue to visit us in our sleep? How 1,000 generous gestures fade from memory, while betrayal's details stay crystal clear? Yet here's a reality that will transform your entire understanding of recovery. Your struggle to move forward isn't rooted in excessive love. It stems from fear of loving fully. The philosopher-emperor Marcus Aurelius observed, "Limit yourself to the present moment." However, regarding lost romance, most individuals trap themselves in yesterday. They transform into captives of their own attachment, shackled to memories of someone who has already continued their journey. They confuse their failure to release with evidence of their loving nature. But this isn't authentic love, it's ownership. Understanding this distinction will determine whether you recover or stay fractured indefinitely. The ancient Stoics grasped something about human pain that contemporary psychology has only lately confirmed. Our anguish doesn't arise from our experiences themselves, but from our opposition to what has occurred. Each moment spent grasping at someone who no longer wishes to be embraced is a moment where you select misery over liberation. Yet what drives this grasping? Why do thoughtful, conscious individuals voluntarily trap themselves within memories of connections that have already perished? The explanation resides in a basic misconception regarding attachment's essence and the mechanics of loss. When you find yourself unable to release someone, you're not proving love's intensity. You're exposing your self-worth's deficiency. Those who recognize their inherent value don't plead with existence to restore what was never meant to remain. Let's investigate what truly occurs when release becomes impossible. You've developed what mental health professionals term a trauma bond, an emotional dependency on the neurochemical mixture of hope and devastation that perpetuates your cycling between imagination and destruction. Your mind, craving the dopamine surge of reunion, constructs elaborate possibilities where reconciliation becomes feasible. You revisit exchanges, hunting for concealed significance. You examine their online activity like a scholar decoding ancient manuscripts. You preserve hope, despite overwhelming proof that the connection has concluded. This isn't romantic commitment. It's psychological self-injury disguised as faithfulness. The harsh paradox is that your failure to release virtually ensures they'll never come back. Desperation repels everyone, including former lovers. Your grasping energy transmits vulnerability, neediness, and emotional chaos, precisely opposite to what initially attracted them. Yet here's what most don't grasp about releasing. It's not about erasing them or denying the relationship's significance. It's about revolutionizing your connection with the memory itself, shifting from ownership to thankfulness, from possession to recognition, from grasping to blessing. The ancient Buddhist principle of loving kindness offers a structure that Western psychology has only recently started to comprehend. When you genuinely wish someone well completely, without expecting reciprocation, you liberate yourself from resentment's cage. However, this practice demands extraordinary bravery because it requires loving without conditions, including the condition that they reciprocate. Most resist this method because they mistake love for attachment. They think that ceasing to suffer over someone means they never truly cared. The reverse is accurate. Suffering over someone unavailable isn't love, it's ego. Genuine love desires what benefits the other person, even when their benefit excludes you. Consider the contrast between these two inner dialogues. My love is so intense I cannot release them, versus my love is so intense I desire their happiness even without my presence. The former is possession masquerading as dedication. The latter represents love in its most authentic expression. This comprehension of genuine love demands what psychologists label emotional differentiation, the capacity to preserve your selfhood while caring deeply for another. Most lack this ability because they never learned the distinction between intimacy and enmeshment, between caring and codependency, between loving someone and dissolving into them. Emotional differentiation means experiencing feelings deeply without drowning, caring profoundly without being consumed, loving completely without vanishing into another person's identity, needs, or difficulties. This ability separates mature love from youthful infatuation. Without emotional differentiation, every connection threatens your independence. You either create distance to preserve autonomy or lose yourself to sustain connection. Yet differentiated individuals can be simultaneously separate and together, independent and intimate, autonomous and attached. The person you cannot release likely activated your undifferentiated emotional patterns. Perhaps you dissolved into the relationship, making them your universe's center. Perhaps you became dependent on their validation, presence, approval. Perhaps you began defining yourself through their perspective rather than your own. This explains why releasing feels like death, because in certain ways, the version of yourself that existed only in relation to them must perish for you to emerge as someone capable of healthy love. Yet here's what most fail to understand. The anguish of losing someone frequently relates less to losing them and more to losing the version of yourself you became alongside them. You're not merely mourning the relationship, you're mourning an identity constructed on unstable foundation. This clarifies why certain breakups devastate us, while others, even from lengthier relationships, leave us comparatively intact. The devastating ones involve abandoning ourselves to preserve connection. The manageable ones involve remaining ourselves throughout the relationship. The question becomes, who existed before meeting them? Which parts of yourself did you sacrifice to maintain their interest? What aspirations did you suppress? What boundaries did you discard? Which personality aspects did you hide? Recovery isn't merely about overcoming them. It's about returning to yourself. The self that existed before learning to twist into someone you believed they would love. The self possessing opinions, preferences, goals, and values independent of their approval. This self-recovery process explains why some emerge from heartbreak stronger than when entering the relationship. They utilize the pain as motivation for rebuilding themselves fundamentally, but this time on a foundation of self-knowledge rather than others' approval. The ancient Greek concept of eudaimonia, often translated as happiness but better understood as human flourishing, provides a framework for this reconstruction. Eudaimonia doesn't depend on external circumstances or others' choices. It emerges from living according to your values, developing your potential, and contributing your unique gifts to the world. When your happiness depends on another's presence, you're living in what philosophers call hedonic adaptation, constantly requiring more external stimulation to maintain the same satisfaction level. Yet, eudaimonic well-being is internally generated and therefore sustainable regardless of relationship status. The person you cannot release became your substance. Like any dependency, tolerance developed over time. You required more of their attention, affection, and validation to achieve the same emotional elevation. When they departed, you experienced withdrawal. Instead of recognizing this as dependency recovery, you labeled it as proof of authentic love. Yet authentic love doesn't create dependency. It creates freedom. It doesn't diminish you, it expands you. It doesn't shrink you. It helps you become more yourself than ever before. If you found this perspective on releasing valuable, ensure you subscribe and press the like button. It helps more people discover these insights about transforming pain into power and attachment into authentic love. Consider how different your existence would be if instead of teaching you to grasp, relationships taught you to develop. Instead of creating dependency, they fostered greater independence. Instead of losing yourself in others, you discovered more of yourself through connection. This is healthy relationships paradox. The more secure you are in yourself, the more intimacy you can handle. The less you require someone, the more you can genuinely love them. The more complete you are alone, the more you can contribute to partnership. This distinction matters because your internal narrative determines your emotional reality. When you grasp at someone from pain, you're essentially declaring, "My happiness depends on controlling another's choices." Yet when you release someone from love, you're proclaiming, "My happiness comes from my capacity to love, regardless of whether that love is reciprocated." The first position makes you victim of circumstances beyond control. The second makes you sovereign over your emotional state. Yet let's address the genuine reason most cannot release: fear. Fear that releasing them means accepting the relationship's true conclusion. Fear that progressing forward dishonors what you shared. Fear that releasing means admitting you were mistaken about their importance. Most terrifyingly, fear that if you cease suffering over them, no one will ever matter as deeply again. These fears stem from scarcity thinking, the belief that love is limited, that deep connections are uncommon, that losing this person means losing your chance at happiness. Yet abundance thinking recognizes that your capacity to love deeply isn't diminished by loss, it's enlarged by it. Every person entering your life teaches you something about love. Some teach opening your heart, others teach protecting it. Some reveal what you desire, others expose what you cannot tolerate. The person you cannot release taught you that you're capable of profound attachment, yet they also revealed your need to learn the distinction between love and dependency. The practice of releasing begins with radical acceptance of what exists, not what you hoped would be, not what you think should be, what actually is. The relationship has concluded. They've chosen departure. Your attempts to alter this reality have failed. These are facts, not interpretations. Most become stuck at this stage because they confuse acceptance with approval. You don't need to like what occurred to accept it happened. You don't need to agree with their choice to acknowledge they made it. You don't need to consider it fair to recognize it's final. Acceptance isn't passive resignation, it's active acknowledgement of reality. Only from this foundation of truth can you begin transformation's work. The next step involves what I term emotional archaeology, the process of excavating the beliefs, expectations, and attachments keeping you bound to someone no longer available. This requires honest examination of your motivations for grasping. Are you holding on because you genuinely believe the relationship should continue, or because your ego cannot accept rejection? Are you fighting for love or fighting against loss? Are you attempting to win them back, or simply trying to avoid progressing forwards pain? Most discover their attachment relates less to the other person and more to their own unprocessed needs. The partner they cannot release often represents something they feel they lack within themselves: validation, security, worth, completion. When you grasp at someone else to feel whole, you make them responsible for your psychological well-being. This isn't love, it's emotional parasitism, and no healthy person wants to become someone else's self-worth source. True healing begins when you reclaim responsibility for your own completeness, when you cease outsourcing your happiness to another's choices, when you recognize your worth was never dependent on their continued presence in your life. This shift from external validation to internal security allows genuine releasing to occur, because you cannot release what you believe you need to survive. The practice of loving-kindness meditation is powerful precisely because it reverses the neurochemical patterns keeping you trapped. Instead of marinating in resentment, betrayal, and abandonment, you consciously generate compassion, understanding, and goodwill. This isn't about naivety or pretending they didn't hurt you. It's about recognizing that carrying hatred resembles drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Every moment spent in resentment is a moment stolen from your own healing. Yet loving-kindness practice goes deeper than emotional regulation. It's a form of spiritual alchemy, transforming suffering's lead into wisdom's gold. When you can genuinely wish well someone who caused you pain, you demonstrate mastery over your emotional state. You prove your happiness isn't hostage to another's behavior. Start with small acts of mental generosity. When thinking of them, instead of rehearsing grievances, practice saying, "No, may you be happy. May you be healthy, may you find peace." Initially, this will feel forced, even fake. Your ego will rebel against offering kindness to someone who doesn't deserve it. Yet deserving has nothing to do with it. This practice isn't for them, it's for you. Every time you choose compassion over resentment, you strengthen your capacity for emotional freedom. Every moment spent wishing them well is a moment you're not spending in self-imposed suffering. Over time, something remarkable occurs. The emotional charge around their memory begins dissipating. The stories you tell yourself about the relationship become less dramatic, less personal, less painful. You begin seeing the entire experience with clarity, rather than through wounded attachments' distorting lens. This doesn't mean forgetting them or minimizing what you shared. It means you can remember without bleeding. You can acknowledge the good times without demanding their return. You can feel grateful for what was without being devastated by what isn't. Yet the deepest level of releasing requires confronting your own mortality. Every attachment is ultimately temporary. Every relationship will end through choice, circumstance, or death. The Buddha called this impermanence and identified our resistance to it as all suffering's root. When you truly understand that nothing lasts forever, you cease trying to make temporary things permanent. You appreciate what you have while you have it, knowing loss is inevitable. This perspective doesn't make love less meaningful. It makes every connection moment precious. The person you cannot release was never yours to keep. They were a gift, temporary, beautiful, transformative, yet never permanent. Your suffering comes from demanding permanence in a world defined by change. Once you accept impermanence as existence's fundamental nature, releasing becomes not just possible, but natural. Like autumn leaves releasing from the tree, you can let go not from weakness but from wisdom, not from lack of love but from abundance of understanding. This is where ancient wisdom traditions diverge from modern psychology. Psychology often focuses on healing trauma and restoring normal function. Yet wisdom traditions go further. They use suffering as a doorway to awakening. Your inability to release isn't just a personal problem to solve. It's a spiritual invitation to grow beyond the small self, demanding the world conform to its desires. It's an opportunity to discover that your capacity for love isn't diminished by loss but refined by it. The person who hurt you became your teacher, though they never intended it. They taught you that happiness sourced from another person is inherently unstable. They showed you the distinction between love and attachment. They revealed your own capacity for resilience. They forced you to discover strength you didn't know you possessed. From this perspective, even painful relationships become gifts, not because the pain was good, but because it revealed what needed healing within you. The person you cannot release exposed every wound requiring attention, every belief needing examination, every pattern demanding transformation. Yet here's the paradox. The more completely you release, the more likely they are to return. Not because releasing is a strategy for getting them back, but because people are attracted to those who don't need them. When you cease grasping, you become attractive again. When you stop chasing, you become worth pursuing. This isn't a manipulation tactic. It's a recognition of human psychology. Desperation repels everyone. Neediness destroys attraction. Emotional independence creates magnetic pull. Yet by the time you've truly released, their return becomes irrelevant. You've discovered that your happiness was never dependent on their presence. You've learned that love is not about holding on, but about allowing. You've realized that the person you really needed to find was yourself. The greatest irony of releasing is that it often leads to recovering something even better than what you lost. Not necessarily the same person, but the same capacity for love without attachment's dysfunction. Not the same relationship, but a better relationship with yourself. When you can love without grasping, you become capable of healthy intimacy. When you can appreciate without possessing, you attract partners who value freedom as much as connection. When you can wish well someone who hurt you, you demonstrate emotional maturity that draws mature people into your life. The practice of releasing transforms you from someone who loves from neediness into someone who loves from fullness, from someone who grasps from fear into someone who embraces from courage, from someone who suffers over what they cannot control into someone who finds peace in what they can. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. Releasing is not a single event, but a daily practice. Every time you catch yourself rehearsing old grievances, you choose compassion instead. Every time you find yourself stalking their online presence, you choose presence instead. Every time you feel attachment's familiar pull, you choose freedom instead. Some days will be harder than others. Grief isn't linear and healing isn't constant. There will be moments when old pain resurfaces, when the temptation to reach out feels overwhelming, when releasing seems impossible. In these moments, remember that your suffering is optional. Loss's pain is inevitable. Relationships end, people depart, love sometimes dies. Yet the suffering you add to that pain through resistance, resentment, and attachment is entirely your choice. You can choose to honor what you shared without demanding it continue. You can choose to appreciate what you learned without regretting that it ended. You can choose to love what was without destroying what could be. The person you cannot release gave you the greatest gift possible, though they probably don't know it. They showed you that you're capable of profound love. They revealed that you can survive profound loss. They taught you that happiness must come from within rather than from without.